Pass me that bowl, would you? Thank you.
Butter toast, friends.
To good food and better company.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joy of Passion Ministry. My name is Brother Martin, and today we're going to talk about something very simple, something that existed long before church buildings, denominations, or religion as we know it today. We're going to talk about the way. Before Christianity was called a religion, it was called the way. Not because it was a system, but because it was a way people lived their lives every day. And the reason we're talking about this is very simple. A lot of people today are confused, tired, or hurt by religion, and they feel pressure, division, or distance, but they still want truth, peace, and meaning. So instead of arguing about institutions or traditions, we're going to slow down and look at how faith was actually lived in the beginning. Not theory, not performances, not buildings, just people living, sharing, resting, and walking the way together. And as we go through this, we're not asking anyone to abandon everything they know. We're just asking an honest question. What happens when faith is lived and not just talked about? So let's begin and look at the way. What if I told you that when Christianity first started, there was no church buildings, no stages, no pulpits, no denominations? So what did faith actually look like back then? Before Christianity was even called a religion, it was known as the way. That's actually what it was called back in the book of Acts. And that name matters because the way wasn't about joining an institution. It described a way of living. Faith wasn't something people attended once a week. It was something they walked out every day. So instead of asking, what church do you go to? The question back then was more like, how are you living? Are you walking the way? Early followers of Yeshua didn't meet in church buildings. They met in homes, they shared meals, they prayed together, they talked about real life struggles, doubts, needs. Church didn't feel like an event. It felt more like a family. Faith happened around dinner tables, not stages. The apostles didn't build institutions, they built people. Take Paul the apostle, for example. Paul traveled from place to place, encouraging small communities of believers. He didn't write letters to buildings, he wrote to people. And those people were expected to live their faith out daily. At home, at work, with their neighbors. Leadership back then wasn't about control. It wasn't about titles or platforms. Leaders were guides. They taught, they corrected, they encouraged, and then trusted people to live it out. The Holy Spirit wasn't replaced by systems. Community was the structure. As Christianity grew, things changed. More people meant more organization. Buildings were built. Roles became formal. Some of that helped faith spread, but something else happened too. Faith slowly shifted from something people lived to something people attended. This video isn't about attacking churches. It's about asking an honest question. Did we lose something simple along the way? When faith becomes mostly about service, schedules, buildings, it's easy to forget that Christianity started as a way of life. The way was relational. It was personal. It was lived out in everyday moments. And that raises a powerful question for us today. What would faith look like if we focused less on structure and more on living the way? Before Christianity had buildings, budgets, or denominations, it had people who lived their faith out together. Maybe the goal isn't to go backwards, but to remember what mattered from the beginning. Not religion, but the way. Early gatherings were made up of ordinary people, families, workers and laborers, widows, the poor, travelers, merchants, and neighbors. There were no celebrity leaders or performers. Everyone participated. Faith was shared among equals and not consumed from a distance. When early believers gathered in houses, they shared meals together. They prayed together. They talked honestly about life and struggles, learned how to follow Yeshua daily, help one another with real needs. Faith was practical. Love showed up in actions, not just words. They didn't meet only once a week. They met often, as life happened, before work, after work, during meals, in moments of need. Faith wasn't scheduled into a single hour. It was woven into everyday life. They met in homes. Not because homes were special buildings, but because homes were personal and relational and safe and close to everyday life. Homes allowed people to be known, seen, and supported. Houses made faith real. In house gatherings, no one could hide in the crowd. Everyone had a voice. Needs were noticed quickly, and care was immediate and personal. Faith grew naturally because people were doing life together. Meeting in houses produced powerful results: strong relationships, real accountability, shared responsibility, deep trust, faith that actually changed behavior. People weren't spectators, they were participants. Today, church often emphasizes large gatherings over small relationships, stages and production over shared participation, scheduled events over daily discipleship, and this model can inspire, but it also creates distance. Many people attend faithfully, yet remain unseen, unheard, and unsupported. The way did not rely on scale to create impact, it relied on closeness, what often gets lost today. Being known. Crowds make it easy to disappear. Shared responsibility. A few lead while many watch, and everyday faith, belief becomes separated. This is not a judgment, it's observation. What the world could look like if the way was practiced today, well, instead of imagining bigger churches, imagine stronger neighborhoods. If people practiced the way today, faith would show up in homes, not just buildings. Care would happen quietly and consistently. Needs would be met before they become crises. Community would replace isolation. The impact would be slower but deeper. The modern Christian culture often asks, "What church do you attend? How often do you show up?" A life shaped by the way asks, "Who are you walking with? Who are you caring for? Where is your faith visible?" One expression is event-centered and the other is life-centered. The question is not whether churches are good or bad. The question is whether our faith still reaches our homes, our schedules, our relationships, our communities. The way does not compete with church. It fills the spaces that church cannot. This isn't a call to tear anything down, but it is a reminder the way was never meant to live behind walls. It was always meant to be lived out in homes and streets and workplaces and relationships. Now imagine a world where church buildings were never built. No steeples, no stages, no church brands. Instead of following a religion called Christianity, people simply lived the way. A shared way of life rooted in love, faithfulness, and responsibility towards one another. We're now going to explore what life might have looked like in 2026 if faith had always remained at home-based, relational, and lived out daily, and whether that kind of world could be more peaceful. How people would gather? Well, people would still gather, just not in large buildings. They would meet in homes, apartments, backyards, community spaces. Gatherings would be small, personal, relational. Everyone would be known. No one would disappear into a crowd, and faith would feel close and not distant. How faith would be lived? Faith would not be a weekly event. It would show up at dinner tables and workplaces and neighborhoods during hardship. Instead of asking, "Did you go to church?" people would ask, "How are you living? Who are you caring for? Are you walking the way?" Again, belief would be measured by action, not attendance. How communities would function without church buildings? Care would be local, needs would be visible, help would be immediate, loneliness would be harder to hide. People would rely on one another instead of institutions to solve personal and communal problems, and community would not be optional, it would be essential. How leadership would look? There would be no celebrity pastors. Leaders would be relational, trust-based, grounded in example. Leaders would guide, not perform. Authority would come from integrity and consistency, not titles or platforms. How different the world might feel? Well, if the way had remained the primary expression of faith, neighborhoods would be stronger, families would be more connected, people would feel less isolated, care for the poor and vulnerable would be personal, not distant, and faith would slow life down instead of speeding up. Would there be more peace? Well, peace would not come from perfection. It would come from closeness. People actually knowing and caring for one another. Conflicts would be handled face to face, not through systems. Forgiveness would be practiced, not just preached. And when people are known, violence becomes harder. And when people are cared for, desperation decreases. Peace would grow quietly, locally, and steadily. How this world would differ from today? Well, in this world, faith would not be politicized. Religion would not be an industry. Belief would not be a performance. People would not argue as much about labels. They would focus more on living rightly. What this could still look like in 2026 and beyond, this world does not require the past. It can exist now. In 2026 and beyond, living the way could mean opening homes again, eating together regularly, sharing resources quietly, living faith outside the gates, not replacing gatherings, but reshaping daily life. If church buildings never existed, faith would not be smaller, it would be closer. The way would still spread, not through structures, but through lives. And while it would not eliminate all conflict, it could soften the world, not through power, but through people choosing to live differently together. And when people followed the way, faith was simple. It was not confusing. It was not about rules to impress others. It was about loving God and loving people every day. And this is what life looked like when faith was lived in a way even children could understand. No one wanted what others had. People were taught not to compare. They did not look at someone else's house, food, or clothes and feel jealous. Instead of saying, I want what they have, they asked, do they have enough? When people stopped wanting more than others, peace grew. They shared what they had. If someone had extra food, they shared. If someone needed help, others stepped in. No one was forced. No one was shamed. People helped because they cared. And this meant fewer people were hungry, fewer people were alone, and everyone felt safe. They celebrated God together. They had special days to celebrate God. These days were joyful. People ate together, told stories, laughed, and remembered what God had done. Faith was not heavy. It included joy and celebration. They ate with care. They paid attention to what they ate, not to be better than others, but to remember God in daily life. Every meal was a reminder God provides. Life is a gift. Even eating was part of their faith, like Leviticus 11. They rested every week, Shabbat. One day each week, they stopped working, they rested. They spent time with family, they prayed. This taught them. They were not machines. They did not have to work all the time. God would take care of them. Rest helped their hearts stay calm. What this did for people, because life was simple, people felt less stressed, families were closer, children felt safe, faith felt gentle, not scary, and people were shaped by kindness, not pressure. What life could look like today, if people lived this way, the world would feel softer, slower, kinder. The way was not about being perfect. It was about being faithful. People shared, people rested, people celebrated. Faith was part of everyday life, and that is something anyone, even a child, can understand. And with that being said, y'all can go in peace, and peace be with you.
How about a toast, friends?
To good food and better company. Pass me that bowl, would you? Thank you.
How about a toast, friends?
To good food and better company.